It's been a while, but it's finally time for architecture, coffee, and ink. Hello, this is Hollywood C, and you're listening to Architecture, Coffee, and Ink, a podcast dedicated to introducing concepts, detailing out designs, and tackling the architecture you might not realize the meaning behind. I'm your hostess, and I am here today to start introducing you to the designs that make you wonder why. So I ask you to brew your coffee, grab your sketchbook and pen, and let's begin. Hello once again, my designers, dreamers, and everyone in between. This is an extremely exhausted Hollywood C with a solid 800 plus mile move officially under my belt. I might have boxes still stashed in my closets, but I am super excited to kick off the next phase of architecture, coffee, and ink. And what a better way to do that than to dive right into an interview. I will update you all a bit more on what's been going on with me next week because I don't want to take away from this interview with Charles Alexiou, the co-founder of Sydney-based Mid-Century Modern Homes, or MCM Homes. Before we dive straight into the interview, let me give a brief bio. As someone with an incredibly diverse background, he brings his life experiences into the field. He has a background in nuclear physics, applied mathematics, investment banking, and software design. Combined with the emphasis on quality, he delivers designs that simultaneously draw inspiration from modernism while still being innovative and avant-garde. Please help me welcome Charles Alexiou as we discuss his designs, his advice about the housing market in Australia, and some great advice about finances and investments. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
But while I have briefly introduced you to the podcast, can you go into a bit more depth about both your background and your amazing firm? I noticed while looking through your website that there seems to be some inspiration from the modernist movement, or perhaps a touch of Harry Seidler's Modernist Pavilion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a little bit about my background. I actually grew up in the Northern Territory, which is real Crocodile Dundee territory in Darwin. And I spent most of my childhood school holidays on building sites. My dad had a construction company, and so my mother would farm the various different children out to for the school holidays, and I would always go to work with Dad. And I guess I was able to internalize that in some way, shape or form. From there, it just became a passion, and I was fascinated with design and the process. And so that's sort of my childhood. I had many former lives. I studied in nuclear physics and applied mathematics at the Australian National University. And as though that wasn't torture enough, I went on to do an honours degree in applied mathematics. But I ended up landing myself in banking, which was, I is showing my age here. I graduated in the mid-80s. So, and that was when there was a really interesting time, during the whole, Wall Street sort of era, big hair, big shoulder pads. And it was very fashionable, very much in vogue to be in banking. And so my mathematical background was very appealing to the banks. And so I landed myself a position there initially as a trainee dealer in foreign exchange. And I moved up to be the chief technical analyst for the bank. And then from there, I then migrated onto software design, IT, which was like the next big craze. And I sort of realized sort of fairly quickly after that I was being attracted to highly paid industries. And the reason for that was because it was actually helping me fund what I was really passionate about, which was property. So during that whole period of time, I would buy properties, do them up, sell them. Meanwhile, I was working full time. So I got to a certain stage where my mother passed away, and it's like that whole sort of, when you lose a parent, like everything, your whole world is sort of rattled a little bit. And you sort of think, okay, what's really important to me in life? And so that's when I thought, I'm really passionate about design and architecture. I'm just going to pursue that. And so I then graduated into that field. I'm not an architect, I'm a building designer, but my business partner, Mr. Pappas, he is an architect. So I have, and this will probably come through, I have more of a passion for the interiors, and he is more for the exteriors. And so what we do is we work really well together. We all complement each other. And that's where the whole Pappas Alexiou came from. In relation to MCM Homes, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was I don't know if you experienced this in the US, but here in Australia, the building industry sort of was, just basically not decimated, but it was just very quiet. There was nothing happening. And we feel that because architects and designers are like the canaries down a coal mine. We're the first to get the chop as far as priorities are concerned when the economy starts getting tough. So we decided to sit down and we thought, okay, what can we do that utilises our skills, our knowledge, our contact base to do something outside the square? So we're not just architects. And that's when we decided to design pre-designed homes with that. We're both passionate about the mid-century modern sort of era because it's so optimistic, and all of a sudden it was born post Second World War, the world was at peace, and it's just such a inspiring period in architecture. So we decided to design a series of homes for estates. I don't know in the US whether you have that sort of concept or philosophy where there's almost like a big suburb or an area that developers they acquire the land while it's sort of zoned rural or whatever.
Yeah.
And they'll then apply to council to have it rezoned for residential, and they usually carve them up into little blocks, and they put the infrastructure in, the streets and the sewerage and the street lights and all that sort of stuff, and then they sell the lots, and people then can put their own houses on there. And so we decided to design homes specifically for those sized lots. So that's why in our on the website, what we have is we have them compartmentalized into groups, and by usually people when looking at a home, they want number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, number of car spaces, plus or minus a swimming pool. So and what we've also done is we've also said suitable for a block of land with X meters frontage or X feet frontage for your audience. So that's how MCM came about. And what we found out that because until now, all the project homes, in inverted commas, are all very, very similar. They're all identical. It's almost as though they've all gone to the same designers. And the only thing that really differentiates them is maybe some texture on the facade or some different colouring, but they're all those fairly, homogenized sort of homes. And so we decided to have a point of difference, and we have been surprised at the positive feedback that we've been getting. And it's almost as though, retro and mid-century modern is coming back in a big way. So that's a little bit about my background and about how we got to this point with MCM.
No, I definitely agree about it kind of coming back. As soon as I saw your beautiful website, it was like, oh, that looks so it's very familiar in a way.
I think also it's we've grown up experiencing that sort of home. And you're right, there's that familiarity, and it's great because it's familiar to us, but it's new to the young generation, and so they think it's all this new stuff, and little do they know.
As a firm, or even just as an individual, what are the steps you take or process you use to see a design come to life? I know you kind of went over how you start up your firm and how you purchase land and things like that. But is there something from the first client conversation, or do you have those conversations with individuals to the completed design?
We wear two hats. One hat is the design hat, and that's really important. And the other hat is the business hat, and that's where you need to wear that hat, because if you don't make money from architecture. And what we've done is we've essentially created these designs. So people that come to us already have looked at the website and like the style of design. It's almost like a self-selecting process where they come to us already, putting their hand up. And so from that point on, we're able to then work with them, and we can customize it for them, be it orientation, or be it roof line, or be it choice of materials for the exterior. We customize and we work with them. Your question was in relation to the first, in a situation where a client will come to us and say, look, I've got this block of land. I like the concept, I like the look and feel. I just want something specific for my site, something bespoke. Then yes, the site plays a very, very important role in that. So there's sort of two elements. With the estates that I talked about before, you're sort of limited because the block sizes are fairly small. And I don't know what they're like in the US, but here in Australia, the sites are like 300 square meters. So they're not very big. So we don't have that luxury to move the house around for the sun. So we make the most of what we've got. But all our designs have got something in there. And if you look closely at them, you'll notice that we have these sort of internal courtyards in the middle of the house. And the whole idea there is to allow the house to breathe and for light to come in and so forth. Whereas the traditional houses are like boxes, and it's dark in the middle of the box. So what we do is we cut out a square, and that allows the building to breathe, bring natural light and ventilation into the middle of the house. So it feels as though you're outdoors without compromising your comfort.
That's a pretty interesting design, especially with like the interior courtyard. So do you use like a lot of passive lighting and things as well in your design, or?
Yeah, absolutely. The environment plays a big role, and with energy prices going up, and we're hearing it all over the world. We need to do our bit, and a lot of our designs are what we call passive solar design. So depending on the orientation of the sun and so forth, we place the courtyard, the internal courtyard, in a place whereby, in a location within the house, whereby it maximizes light, which means heat in winter, and because the sun's much higher in summer, it doesn't heat up the house. It keeps it cool in summer and warm in winter. So they're really important factors, and these are things that these are nothing new. These are things that these concepts and principles in design have been around since the mid-century. It's just that for some reason, I don't know, we just got lazy, or we just didn't care, or we just if it's cold, we just put an air conditioning on, or if it's warm, we'll turn the heater on, So all those elements do play a factor in design.
My favorite question, which you kind of talked about, is how the site plays a role in design. So how does the site impact your design decisions? Kind of already spoke a little bit about it, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Look, no, that's okay. The site plays a major part in it. In those estates, to a lesser extent, because they're there's not much you can do. Whereas if you've got like, say, a quarter acre block of land, which is like 9,000 square feet in units, you've got room to play. You know, you can move the house and swing it around and face it. But with those other blocks, they're so narrow, you know, you can barely get a house on them. The land is really important, the site. It impacts on a lot of things, including, you know, the orientation of the house, sun, ventilation, where prevailing winds are coming from, the aspect, you know, what you're looking at. And that's all really important. And the site actually talks to you and says, this is what's needed here. And our philosophy is to take a very light on the earth type of approach, not those big, heavy, you know, I call them mausoleums, you know, bunker type heavy homes. So mid-century is a very different philosophy, but the land is very, very important.
So I imagine that the experience overall, especially with all your different careers, has given you the opportunity to cultivate some rather unique insights into the field. Where do you and your firm land on the architectural design versus project builder scale, or even design build? I know that in America, not all firms here are part of the build phase, and it's not uncommon to see a firm kind of specialize in one aspect over the other.
Yeah, we sit right in the middle. Or we straddle both. And the reason for that is because we want to have an input into the design, which we obviously have, but we also want to make sure that it is implemented and executed well. You know, you could have the most amazing design, and if the execution is poor, then it'll be it'll be unfortunate for the client. So what we do is we like to have not a control in such, but we just like to keep an eye on it during the build process, have a really good relationship with the builders, and just point out those things that are not done as they should be. And I think that then helps. First of all, it makes for a very, very happy client at the end, and it keeps the intention on track. And what it does for us also is it allows us to constantly be abreast of the various different techniques that builders are using. So we can keep refining our process and our designs accordingly. And that's really important, because if you just design something and you don't care how they execute it, then you know, you're setting yourself up for something over there. So it's a very, we like to keep a foot in both camps, let's put it that way.
That makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of horror stories in the field of architects who let the design go and didn't like what ended up happening at the end. So do you feel that your inspiration helps you with this, the way you approach your designs, and from the start allow you to be designer builders as a firm?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and if you look at how modernist architecture was born, it was born from new ideas, new materials that were available at the time. So all of a sudden we'll be able to have, you know, large expanses of suspended ceilings that weren't able to have before. And so because materials are constantly changing, it's really good to have that, you know, that insight into, you know, what building materials are available, what the builders are doing, how they're doing it, because that helps us then, you know, build it into the next design.
So in following up with that question, does being involved with the entire process give you an advantage in delivering high quality results? And I think you mentioned that being able to pick each individual material really, really helped with that. Yeah. But have you noticed maybe in your past when you first started, maybe you didn't do this and you discovered lesser results?
Yes and no, but
okay.
The answer to your question is I think there's most definitely an advantage in having an involvement in the process from A to Z. It just makes life so much easier for everybody. We know that our plans are being executed as they should. we keep everyone on track. And what I mean by that is mainly, and if there are any clients out there listening, this is for you. When we design a plan, it's a plan. It's like a recipe. Mm-hmm. If you don't follow the recipe, you'll end up with something very different. So what happens, and it's perfectly natural for human beings to do this, is, as things are happening and as things are building, let's change this, or, what do you think of this? And so all of a sudden it starts becoming something that it wasn't intended to be. So we like to keep everything on track, and we're not closed or shut off to those ideas. We're open to them, but we need to be made aware of them so we know whether it will visually and aesthetically and functionally work in the end result.
Okay, that's definitely something I think for the student designers listening that they should take a note of in their answer.
Yeah.
Now, it would be completely remiss of me to have you on the show and not ask you some questions about what individuals, either as clients or young future architects, should know. My show has a listener audience that's kind of a mixture of designers, DIYers, and everyone in between. So inevitably, at some point, they're going to be part of the housing market at some scale, whether it's renting, purchasing, living in the world, whether that is anything. I imagine that homes hold a special place in your heart, but what is your insight on home as an investment?
There are three things that we need as human beings. Mm-hmm. We need food to nourish ourselves. We need clothing to keep ourselves warm and protect ourselves from the elements. And we need a roof over our heads. Now, I don't know, and this is a very interesting question because different markets in different countries are different. Mm-hmm. But certainly here in Australia, the property market is very, very strong. Mm-hmm. We're a relatively new nation. We're sort of viewed to the rest of the world as this sort of, island nation paradise in the Pacific somewhere that has these weird animals jumping around called kangaroos, and these bears that just are comatized from the gum leaves, and so the images of Australia are very positive. Lovely beaches, lovely weather, no, not lately, relatively politically stable. Mm-hmm. There's no riots and there's no coups. No one dies when a new prime minister is sworn into office. So it's Aussies are very laid back. It's like should be right, mate. And we have a very strong political system. Very stable political system. And we have a universal health system as well. Which is very appealing to a lot of people. So I think in the States it's a very different system, the health system. I believe there have been attempts to try and introduce a universal health system to various levels of success, and so there's a pull factor. And because in Australia we can't, I'm trying to pick my words carefully here, we don't produce enough babies, basically. The population isn't growing naturally. We bring migrants in. That's where migration plays a role. And the beauty about migration is, we have something like over 180 nationalities in Australia, and they all live happily with each other, and everyone respects everyone. We don't have gun issues. So what I'm trying to say is that the government has that lever, which is to allow more migration in. Now, the beauty about that is that the point I'm trying to make here is they can increase the population very easily because there's a queue of people waiting to get into the country. And the benefits of that is that most migrants, I would say all migrants, are truly appreciative of the opportunity to be able to resettle in another country, because don't forget, these people are fleeing, wars and famine and all sorts of things, and they are really, really, really hard workers. and they're happy to do whatever it takes to get ahead. There's a very strong emphasis on education with their children. And so by bringing these people in, what we have is we have a population that's growing. They are taxpayers from day dot because they work, and they need a roof over their heads. And that is probably their number one fundamental goal when they come here after they've got the job, is they want to buy a house, because that's the security factor. And just to give you an example of how successful this has been, since records were being kept here in Australia, which is in the late 1800s till now, property has been doubling in price every 7 to 10 years.
Wow.
Okay, so yes, we have some dips, but it's always on the way up, because that demand, we can't build homes quick enough for the demand. So that, to me, says that yes, property is a really good investment, and you're going to make more from buying property in this country. And, you know, if you just imagine, if you buy something worth, you know, $500,000, even if you don't, and you borrow all of it, let's say you borrow all of it, in 7 to 10 years, that $500,000 property is going to be worth $1 million.
Oh wow.
Okay, so that $500,000, let's say they still owe $500,000 to the bank. The other $500,000 is equity. So it's like cash in the bank. So they've made $500,000
just by purchasing a house.
Just by purchasing a house. That's why it's a national sport here in Australia. So that gives you a little bit of insight into our market, anyway. So if there's any new talented architects out there that want to come and relocate to Australia, or please do.
I'll make sure to take them your way. Of course, it goes without saying that finances are an extremely important aspect of this. Do you have any advice or recommendations, particularly for our Australian audience? As you mentioned, it is different globally.
Look, the finances are extremely important, and I always recommend you see a broker or a financial advisor first, to see what your capacity is, because you don't want to go out and buy something and then struggle to get the finance for it, because that's just a disaster for a lot of sleepless nights and relationship breakups. So you want to be able to sleep at night. So buy within your capacity. Now, if your capacity is not as much as you would like it to be, there is still always a property at that price point that you can buy, and you can get your money working for you in the meantime. So in Sydney, for example, the average price of the house is over $1 million now, which is like crazy. Most people can't afford that. And so, if someone says to me, look, my capacity, the bank has said it's only 800,000 or 600,000. Okay, well, let's look at where else what we can do here. And so we'll look at either the Queensland market, which is cheaper, or Melbourne and Victoria. And so they're still able to enter the property market. They're still able to get that money working for them. And when it gets to a point where they've got enough equity in the property and their financial situation has changed and they can afford something else, then they can move up. So it's all about a staging process. But if you, if some people say, look, I'll just keep saving until I have enough of a deposit, then they're always just behind the 8 ball, because the property market keeps moving.
No, that's a lot of sense. That's very good advice, especially I think that's pretty universal advice just for everywhere. Of course, we can't speak about we hit all the continents, so I can't really speak about each individual country as much as I wish I could.
No. But you don't want to have sleepless nights. That's mine. It's not worth it. It really isn't worth it.
One of the other topics that I was interested in hearing your thoughts about was designing for the future, especially in homes. How do we as designers or future designers plan for future?
Good question. With design, there's clients don't often think about what I call future-proofing a home, because a home is something that you will buy and own and live in for years and years and years and years. And how you function and how you function within the house will change. For example, if you're a young family, it has a different purpose. You've got kids running around and all that sort of stuff. So, but what you need to do is you need to think forward and say, okay, those kids are going to start going through school, and the importance of running around in the backyard is not going to be as important as a study or something like that. And then you've got to think again further forward and say, okay, they've grown up and they've left home, and then you aren't as healthy. So stairs, those sort of things need to be taken into consideration in order to future-proof a home, because its purpose changes. Its overarching purpose of having a roof over your head is the same. It doesn't change, but how you function within it does change, and that's really important. So it has that flexibility to do that, where so rooms that were used for a certain purpose can be used for something else in the future. So you don't, if that makes any sense. And the other thing is also just little things that can be done from the very beginning that can make a huge difference. For example, having corridors that are slightly wider so a wheelchair can fit down it. I'm not saying that you're going to need it. Touch wood, you don't. But we're humans. We don't know what the future holds. And if you're in a wheelchair, or your partner's in a wheelchair, you want to be able to get them easily from room to room. So all these, and having light switches slightly lower, like at arm's length, as opposed to up there. Just little things like that can make a huge difference. So I've had, because people don't want to leave their home. As they get older and older, they just don't want to leave their home. And so if you can make those minor changes at the beginning, then it makes it very comfortable for them. And it gives them longevity in the home. They're happier, and they're not put into a home or whatever. And I think it's just like a win-win-win all round.
No, that makes a lot of sense, especially the light switches. It's not something like an everyday thing that you don't think about when you're in the prime of your life.
You don't think twice about bending down or stretching up into those tall cupboards or things like that. But you need to think forward, and things like just having an extra wide shower recess. So if you are, you might be in a car accident and you've broken a leg. You've gone skiing, in the south of France, and you've broken your leg, and you're in a cast. You want to be able to still have a shower. And in the meantime, you've just got a comfortable shower.
That is very true. And finally, one of my favorite questions, I always like to ask one fun question at the very end of the interview.
Here it comes.
If you had an unlimited budget and a client who was willing to give you complete free reins, they just said, design for me whatever you would like, over the scope, the parameters, what would your project be? Whether that's an entire city, a private home, utopian society, it's all up to you.
I think a utopian society is one of those things that mean so many things to different people. So you'll never get something that everyone agrees on. So I'm going to leave that one. I'm going at it by method of elimination. A city, I think, is one of those things that is so multi-layered. It needs a team of great minds to do that. So I would actually go for a private home.
Really?
And the reason I like that is because I have a connection and I get to know the client really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm actually able to do is I'm able to provide them a solution to their needs. Whereas with a city, or you have to make certain assumptions.
Right.
And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I can certainly work with a client to create their forever home. And that gives me great satisfaction. And I always like to chunk things down, and I like to start with one thing at a time, one client at a time, as opposed to 20 clients simultaneously. And the beauty about that is because I can connect with them, I can provide them with what they want, and I also get that. You have no idea the satisfaction I get when I give them the key just before they go in. And yes, they've been in there during the construction time and they've seen certain things, but that last thing where it's all clean and it's all been painted and it's all been styled, and they come back and just give them the key and they walk in, and it just gives me so much joy. I like beaming from earlobe to earlobe for weeks.
No, that's an amazing feeling. That was a very sweet answer. I was kind of expecting like death rays or the
Well, when you said a final thing, I was thinking, oh no, she's going to make me take my clothes off and run around the room or something.
But where can everybody find you if they are in Sydney and or Australia looking for your firm or to see what you have available?
Well, they can just go to our website,
Okay.
and our office is in the heart of the city in Sydney,
Okay.
in a building called Australia Square, which happens to be round, but it was designed by Harry Seidler. And
Wow.
so we're in one of his towers in the city, but our projects are sort of all over the place, scattered everywhere. And I mean, if someone's visiting, I'd love to take them around and show them around if they want. I'll show them the architectural significant areas as well. Yeah, so it might be my next career, architectural tour guide.
Well, I hope not, because your projects that I've seen online are absolutely beautiful. The ones that
Thank you. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited, and stay in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And a big thank you once again. I am so excited to kick off this new chapter of Architecture, Coffee, and Ink with a wonderful interview. And if you are interested in speaking on the show, whether it's yourself, a firm, or just a topic that you are particularly passionate about, don't hesitate to reach out to either the website or the email address. You can even hit me up on Instagram or Twitter, whatever you would like. While both are included in the show notes, both are now Architecture, Coffee, and Ink, all spelt out. So that's Architecture, Coffee, and Ink at gmail.com and architecturecoffeeandink.com. I got rid of the funky old domain, but no worries, I have a redirect set up, so even if you type in the old address, you will still get to the new site. But once again, a big thank you to all my listeners. Please rate, review, and subscribe. It truly helps. And please feel free to send me art, letters, suggestions, firms, projects, whatever. I love hearing from everyone. I'm excited to meet with all my designers, dreamers, and DIY enthusiasts next week with the long-promised Donald Judd episode. I got asked to include some clarification in the episode, so if you asked, I heard you, and I am getting those changes made and included. So look forward to this new chapter of Architecture, Coffee, and Ink. And in the meantime, may your coffee mugs be full and your inkwells never run dry.